The content you're about to enjoy comes from the archives of The Best You. We're devoted to the very best in personal development, with a platform and resources dedicated to inspiring and changing people's lives. At The Best You, we work with the world's leading writers and trainers on the evolution of the self, and people whose journeys have been affected by their work and words. For more information, go to www.thebestyou.co. Harvey is a legendary, visionary producer and promoter of rock concerts, charity events, and television broadcasts. He has produced, managed, and promoted shows with the most of the world's major artists and was responsible for two of the largest music events in the world ever, Live Aid and Live8. Current projects include Jules Holland, Andrea Bocelli, and Hans Zimmer's first live concerts in the UK. Harvey has received numerous awards, including a CBE in 1996, and in January 2006, Harvey was awarded the Chevalier des Arts and Lettres from the French Minister of Culture, and more recently, to celebrate Her Majesty's the Queen Diamond Jubilee, Harvey received the Diamond Award for his contribution to the arts. In July 2012, Harvey received an honorary Doctorate of Arts from the University of Brighton. Now, Harvey was introduced to me by Bill Curbishley, my friend, manager of The Who, who I interviewed in another episode. And the reason I wanted to interview him is because obviously I'm a promoter and I've run relatively large events. But what Harvey has done is just it's a different level. This was concerts seen by millions and millions of people, creating massive awareness with Bob Geldof and Police and all these amazing bands. He has worked with everyone. As a promoter, he's worked with everyone. But not only he has worked with everyone, he has run so many events throughout the year, every single year, for so many years. It's absolutely phenomenal. So when Harvey speaks, people listen. And you should listen too. You're going to learn something. Thank you so much. Hi, I'm Bernardo. Welcome to Inspiring People. Today, we're honoured to have Harvey Goldsmith, the legendary visionary producer, promoter of the biggest artist in the world. Hi, Harvey. Thanks for coming in.
That's a good start.
The visionary and the legendary, absolutely.
The visionary, yeah.
Tell me about your early memories, the earliest days, and how was that? How was like your life coming up? And
well, we always had a lot of music in the house, and my mum used to sing on occasion. My uncle used to play drums. A distant cousin used to play guitar, so there was music around. So my brother played clarinet. It was in the days of, when jazz was hot, and really a lot of music about. So I went to school, and towards the end of my school days, we started a jazz society, and we started to get artists coming in, and I think the artist that I remember the most was a guy called Nat Gonella, who was a trumpeter. He was a bit of a wise old bird, but he was quite well known, and he came to the school and gave a talk and then played some music, and that really kind of started me off, I suppose. Then I went to university.
How old were you then, Harvey?
15.
15, yeah.
16. Then I went to university to study pharmacy, and I decided to go down to Brighton because the course they had there was something it was a brand new course that I was really interested in, and it was more applied pharmacy, and I was interested in perfumery and cosmetics and marketing. Anyway, I go down to university. 6 weeks after we get there, the course had stopped because the funds hadn't come through. So I had to re-register for an external London degree. And I'd passed on going to London University, which I could have done, which is like the creme de la creme of degrees, because it was too theoretical. And I didn't really want to be a traditional pharmacist. That wasn't my interest. And I was a bit angry about it, because part of your pharmacy studies, you have to have a year off apprenticeship. And a lot of people do it at the end, but I thought if I did it at the beginning, then at least I'd get a hang of what I'm studying. So I'd already done my apprenticeship, and I was actually quite fascinated by marketing and what people coming into the pharmacy job, what kind of products they were buying, what cosmetics they were buying, and you get a run of it because somebody had done some very smart advertising. And I realised then that marketing was everything, and that it didn't necessarily matter what the product was, but if it was well packaged and brilliantly marketed, people would buy it. So I was primed, ready to go, and the course got stopped, and I got a bit angry about it. And the other reason I decided to go down to Brighton is it's a great place, and at the time it was pretty swinging, and I thought there'd be a huge social life. Anyway, I arrived last one Friday morning for a lecture and got nominated to be the pharmacy rep at Students' Union, which was always a joke because it's a very... most medical type courses are 4 years, and this is 3 years plus a year's apprenticeship, and it's very condensed. So you work 6 days a week, which all of the other courses, which was under Sussex University, this whole campus idea, was it was 2 lectures and a tutorial a week, and see you later kind of thing. We were working literally every single day and Saturdays as well. So I pitch up at the Student Union, and I'm listening to them all rattling off all the various, the chess club and the rugby club and the cricket club and the this and that and the other. And I'm going, wait a minute, where's the social life? So I stuck my hand up, and the president of the union kind of saw me, said, yeah, who are you? And I said, I'm pharmacy, and everybody giggled because they'd never seen a pharmacy rep before. And he said, okay, what have you got to say? And I said, where's the social life? He said, what do you mean? I said, I came down here for the social life and for entertainment and stuff like that. There isn't any. So he said, what would you like to do? And I said, I think we should start a club. And he kind of looked at me, he said, all right, start a club. I said, okay, as if to say, screw you, I will. I thought about it. I took over the Student Union in Canteen Friday night, changed it all around, put some lighting in, what minimal resource there was around, and, put nuts and candles on the table and started a club. And within about a month, he couldn't get in. And so I realised that, and this was presenting live entertainment, so I realised there was a hole for it. And next thing that happened to me, because by this time I got completely bored by the degree that I was doing, because it wasn't what I wanted to do, and I was pretty angry about it as well, because I was lucky enough to have the choice of any pharmacy course I wanted to do, and the one I wanted to do wasn't available. So the next thing is I got nominated or voted to be the RAG chairman for RAG Week, which is the week when students go mad and collect a lot of money for local charities, and put on a big event for RAG Week, and which included John Mayall backing John Lee Hooker, the blues musicians, and there was a guy in his band called Eric Clapton who I'd heard about and actually been to see, and I thought he was a pretty amazing guitarist, so I pulled him out of the John Mayall bit and put underneath on the bottom, featuring Eric Clapton. I think it's the first time anybody had ever seen that. And John Mayall didn't say anything. Anyway, the show was sold out and it went really well. Next thing that happens, I became social secretary, and then this club that I started called Club 66, which started January 1966, was thriving, and I started booking shows and events for the university, and then I ended up booking artists for 12 colleges across the South Coast. I had an office as secretary and was on the finance committee of the university because I was bringing in so much money they couldn't believe it. And so it kind of took over my life, and I got really interested in it. And then the next thing that happened was an opportunity came up by the clock at Brighton, which is right in the centre of Brighton, and there was a room above a coffee shop that was available. And I went to a guy called Ricky Farr, who started the Isle of Wight festivals, who I'd met in my journeys, and said, would you partner me? He'd started the Ricky T clubs, and would you partner me? I'd like to start a club. So I did it, called the Kangaroo Club. And that really set me. I was then running the club, 66. I was running my own club called the Kangaroo Club. I was booking all these acts across the South Coast and all these colleges and universities. And somewhere down the line, I was supposed to be doing pharmacy.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, were you still studying then?
Yeah, well, officially. I was having a ball, actually.
Yeah.
And it was a period of time of major, major change.
Yeah.
It was a period of time when young people started to demand a say in life rather than sitting in the backwards and spoke when you're told to and otherwise shut up. And there was a huge amount of change. It was a very creative period between kind of 64 and 71, 72. That was the major shift change in music and entertainment when young people started to come to the front, demand their kind of music, and it was getting a voice. And all the great acts, most of whom are still around, really came out of that period. And if you think of The Who and the Rolling Stones and Fleetwood Mac and bands of that nature, all came out of that period. Pink Floyd, then there was Mark Bolan, and then towards the end of that era, David Bowie and Elton John and so on. And so what happened with me was I wanted to go to America. And before that, I wanted to stand as president of the union. I thought, at least if I've done that, become president of the student union at the university, I've done something at university, because I knew I was never going to carry on with this course. I was just hated it. And I had to get seconded by my professor, who refused point blank and said, you're here to study. You know, you haven't got time to be president of the union. You know, this is what you're here for. You're not doing enough anyway, but you've got to do more. And I was even more upset. Anyway, after a long chat with him, he told me about opportunities of exchange courses in America and agreed that I could go on an exchange course, which I did. So I went to America, went on an exchange course, ended up in Toledo, Ohio, which is in the middle of space at this university. I did one semester, which is a term, and got bored with that. Had an aunt who lived in New York, and it was the summer term, so went to New York where it was just frying in July, and I stayed with her for a few days and had a good look around New York and whatever, and saw an ad in the paper for that if you were a foreign student, you could buy a $99 99-day Greyhound bus ticket and you can go anywhere across America. So I thought, this sounds fabulous. So I bought my Greyhound bus ticket and I wormed my way across America over a period of about 10 days, I think, stopping off in places I've never been to since. I probably saw more of America on that run than I'd ever seen since. Anyway, I had a bit of an experience in Las Vegas where when I got off the bus driver says to me, keep your ticket, take it down to the Mint Casino and they'll give you $15 worth of chips. I thought, this sounds like a good idea. Go down to the Mint, stroke of luck, won, I think it was about $900.
Wow.
And I thought, this is it. Went to Caesar's Palace, booked myself into a very nice room and went to see some music and had a really great time. Got back on the bus because it's not easy travelling around on a bus, you know, which is, you know, kind of a public bus. And then decided to go to San Francisco. As we're going over Golden Gate Bridge downtown, and I was going to stay at the Y. And I saw this crowd gathering down below in Golden Gate Park, and I could hear kind of a semblance of music from the bus. I thought, this looks interesting. Checked in, found out how to get to Golden Gate Park, get down there, and a band called the Grateful Dead were playing. And I wormed my way backstage. I said I was the biggest promoter in the UK and this, that and the other. Anyway, got backstage. They were all terribly bemused by my accent and whatever, and kind of took to me. And I became friends with the Grateful Dead and stayed that way for 30-odd years. It was very strange. And then there was all the stuff going on in Haight-Ashbury, and I met Bill Graham, who started the Fillmores, and I met another chap who history doesn't talk about too much, called Chet Helms, who started the Avalon Ballroom. So there was the Fillmore on one side of San Francisco, and there was the Avalon Ballroom on the other side. And all over town were these unbelievable posters advertising shows. And they were so enticing. I'd never heard of the acts, but some of the artwork on those posters, which are now, huge collector pieces, were so good that you just felt you wanted to go and see the show, not even knowing what it was. So all the money I'd earned in Vegas just got blown going to see one act after the other. And I saw...
How old were you then?
I was... how old was I? I was 1967, end of summer of 67, so I was 21.
21.
Anyway, both of those were... Fillmore and Avalon were selling the posters. I thought, this looks interesting. So I went to see them both, and I convinced them I was the biggest poster seller in England because I was really fascinated by this artwork, and came back with a contract to sell Fillmore and Avalon posters in England, actually in Europe, as it happens. And I then really felt that music was kind of in my soul, and this is what I wanted to do. And I got back to England, and I told my parents I was kind of having a year off, and then I was going to finish my course, which is quite normal, and they didn't really understand and kind of accepted it. I was looking in the Evening Standard one night, and it said, partner wanted for poster company, and I thought, there you go, I've got my contracts, I'm off. So I go down to Kensington Market, which then was that whole vibrant Carnaby Street had started. Kensington Market had opened. The whole thing of Bieber and Bus Stop, all these really famous, iconic names, the whole change of fashion and style had all started in that period. And met this chap, and I went into business with him, starting to sell posters. And I did that for about 9 months. And part of the portfolio that this company's called Big O, it's quite a famous poster company, had was that it used to supplement funds to 2 underground magazines. One was called International Times and one was called Oz Magazine. And there was Oz Magazine was a real funky underground magazine. It was run by 2 Australians and an English bloke, and the English guy who's also done brilliantly well, called Felix Dennis. He now is a multi-squillionaire in publishing, whatever. And they published 2 issues, one of which they got busted by the police for obscenity. And they were trying to raise funds to pay for the lawyer, who was John Mortimer, another famous writer and lawyer. And they said to me, and I was always going on about music and what I did at university, blah, 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 blah. And they said, OK, can you put on a show and raise some money for us? So I'm being drawn back into music again, and 2 things happened. One, there was a show at Alexandra Palace called the 14-Hour Technicolor Dream, which was raising money for International Times. And the second was a show called Peace on Earth at Olympia, which was raising money for Oz Magazine, which is a Christmas show. And these 2 shows were quite iconic shows. The Olympia one had Jimi Hendrix and the Animals, and the Alexandra Palace had people like the Pink Floyd and the Pretty Things and Hawkwind and Lord knows what. And Yoko Ono was working on this Alexandra Palace event, and I kind of met up with her and got to know her quite well. So all the way through, my interest started off was marketing, perfumery, cosmetics. This whole fashion and music explosion all took place in the 60s. The whole poster thing, I mean, we did rather well.
What attracted you about the posters? Was it the actual marketing idea behind it? Or
yeah, and the art.
The art,
I've always been interested in art. And it was the artwork that, of these posters, which now, as I say, if you've got any of those early Fillmore or Avalon posters, they're worth a fortune. And we did some very iconic posters. We did a very famous Jimi Hendrix poster in gold with gold circles all the way around, which again, are collector's pieces. We did a series of 4 posters of the Beatles, which Richard Avedon, another famous photographer, did, and we did a poster that sold by the hundreds of thousands of Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway for Bonnie and Clyde, which we just kept selling them till we were told to stop because we had no rights for it whatsoever, but we did. And there was another famous poster which came out of America, which is Frank Zappa sitting on a toilet, and we sold thousands and thousands of those. So I was running around London between Carnaby Street and Kingly Street and that whole era down there, and Kleptomania was one of the great shops there, and some other shops which were selling all this new gear, completely anti-establishment, hippie stuff. And then Kensington Market and Bieber and Bus Stop and those kind of places, which was all high fashion. And we were on the ground floor, we had a poster stall, and then on the second floor we had a little printing work. So we were printing off, silk screening the posters and selling them downstairs in the back. And then in the middle, which was part of the market, on the first floor, there were a group of guys. One was called Brian May, one was called Freddie Mercury, another was called Roger Taylor, and they were selling jewellery and fashion on the first floor, and at the same time trying to play a bit of music.
If you're interested in working with me, contributing to the magazine, maybe speaking at any of our many events around the world, partnering or licensing The Best You, go to www.thebestyou.co.
So you get drawn back to music again.
Yeah. And then Rod Stewart's girlfriend at the time and Ronnie Wood's wife at the time came to work for us in the poster stall. So half of my life we were spending feeding all the musicians. And the other half was still selling posters, and then I'm doing these gigs, so I'm drawn back to music. And I ultimately fell out with my partner in the poster company. It was really his company, but he was always, every time we started to make some money, he was spending it by buying some other art or another deal. We never had any money, and I got fed up with it. And I left and teamed up with a guy who I was at university with, and he became my press officer for all the shows I did at university. He was there. He went to work for Rothschilds, and they sent him on a course about computers. And at that point, one computer filled this room.
But yeah,
and it was really it was so much change going on. He got bored. We teamed up, and I left the poster company, and we teamed up, and we started a little partnership together. He was involved with the Young Conservative movement, or he was a complete hippie. He used to work with a long white thing and up-toed sandals and turn up at Conservative Party meetings. They couldn't figure him out. And he lobbied Camden Council, because we were based in Hampstead, that they were doing this arts festival every year, and they weren't doing anything for young people. And they said, we've got this place in Camden that nobody's really using, doesn't quite know what to do with it, called the Roundhouse. Why don't you see if you can put something on at the Roundhouse? So we did, and we started working in the Roundhouse, and we put on this festival, And then we started doing Sunday nights at the Roundhouse, which came really well. And slowly but surely, we built up a business. And then we had a club in Harlow called the Birdcage. And then we were doing Sunday nights at Hemel Hempstead Pavilion, this very strange venue. Again, it was all brand new.
What kind of musicians were you promoting then?
Oh, nobody of any consequence. No. You know, kind of Elton John and David Bowie and Mark Bolan and The Who. And because they were all young then.
Absolutely.
You know, and the big bands then were Hawkwind were huge. And 10 years after, and Jethro Tull, they were all starting up, and they were more than happy to play in these venues, particularly because we looked after the bands, we knew about their music, and we were interested. Whereas half the places they were playing, they didn't know who they were just booked in, and so we befriended them all, and then again, all coincidence. Life is all about coincidence. It's about coincidence, luck, and timing.
Yeah.
So one of the he was I think the director of entertainment or something. He was one of the senior bureaucrats at the GLC, which is called the Greater London Council, which is like the mayor's office, which ran London. Came down to one night to the Roundhouse and sought us out. An absolute cracking guy named Les Franklin. And he said, I've seen what you guys do. He said, we've got this place called Crystal Palace. And there's a bowl in Crystal Palace. And what do you think about putting some of your popular music on in the bowl? And I said, I don't know, we'll go and have a look at it. And we went to see it. This was end of '68. And it was this fantastic, it still is. I mean, there's three bowls. There's the Hollywood Bowl, there's Kenwood, and they were all modelled on the Crystal Palace Bowl, which was built as part of the exhibition. And it's this conical shaped bowl with a lake in front and then this lawn behind that rose up. So everybody watching the show could see it, but there was a barrier, which is the lake. The reason why there was a lake, not in the Hollywood Bowl, but it is at Kenwood and Crystal Palace, was because when they built it, it wasn't electricity, and the lake was the acoustic bounce for sound. The reason why the stage was a cone is because that was the best acoustic shape that you could build to project the sound up to the back of the bowl. So if you stood facing inwards to the bowl and whispered, you could hear it perfectly well, top of the bowl, and it held 15,000 people. So we started this thing called the Crystal Palace Garden Parties, which really changed my whole life. And the Crystal Palace Garden Parties, we did on average 2 of them a year till about 1973, I think. 74, and they became iconic shows. The first show we did was the Pink Floyd, the Faces and Mountain, and then we did shows with groups like Yes and Elton John and onwards. And then there was we did a show for American television. They came over to see us and filmed a show again, which was all something completely new, and brought the acts with. It was Richie Havens, Melanie, Shana Na, and a whole slew of other acts. And we were doing these, and they became iconic events. And then we were running our club, the Birdcage in Harlow, which we put feeder acts in. They would then go to Hemel Hempstead Pavilion, which is 2,000 odd capacity, play there. We were still doing gigs at the Roundhouse. And then our big thing in the summer was doing these festivals. And it was really amazing times. And there wasn't an act at that point coming up that wouldn't play. And I befriended a lot of them. And then in we'd met up. We couldn't find any funding at that time to do anything. We also did the only ever pop concerts in Parliament Hill Fields. We did 3 of them. And we did a midnight show. And we had about 250 quid to spend on the whole bloody thing, and we scraped and cajoled people to put the stage up and this, that, and the other. And we ended up with like 75,000 people turning up at Parliament Hill Field. And we had acts like the Moody Blues, and we did this midnight show with Fleetwood Mac, which had 75,000 people to it. There's never been a midnight show since, by the way, ever in London. Yeah. It was pretty fantastic. And really, it was just pushing it over. It was like, what could we do next? What other mad thing could we find to do?
Was that your turning point? And then, do you reckon, was that the time when you obviously knew that you were on the right path? And because till then, what was it? Was it a little bit of fun and just making a bit of money? Or
I didn't know what the right path was, so I can't answer that question. All I know was I was enjoying it. It was working. We were making a bit of money. And I was finding it easy to do all the things, and it was complicated. It was no less complicated than it is today to do an event. And we were very mindful of obvious things like health and safety and so on, of health and safety and things like when there were no rules, because we realised, or I realised very early on, you're going to have 75,000 people turning up for an event. You've got to be damn sure you've taken care of them properly, otherwise all sorts of things could happen. So the whole business was mushrooming. There were a number of promoters in existence, kind of old school, that had emerged from the kind of jazz and the big band era, and they were doing things like Sinatra and Tony Bennett and that kind of smoochy, middle of the road type music. And here was I putting on all these rock concerts, and I was going to all sorts of weird and wonderful places like Middle Earth and Covent Garden and finding all these bands, and I, in the middle of it all, had a bit of an aberration, because I thought, I don't know anything about this business. I'm just doing it. And
how were you doing it, Harvey? Because, I mean, for somebody who thinks of getting into the music business as a promoter as such, I mean, what do you think your assets were? How did you manage to do it? How did you manage to pull it off?
Strangely enough, and it sounds a bit weird, my training for how to run an event and what to do, what to look out for, actually came from being in the Scouts. Oh, it sounds very bizarre. So here am I, on one hand, Mr. Goody Two-Shoes being in the Boy Scouts, and on the other hand, I'm tripping out with the Grateful Dead on acid in San Francisco. It's rather bizarre, really. But my training came from, funnily enough, being in the Scouts and being trained how to look after a platoon of Scouts, a troop. And all of the thing, we used to go to camp, and we would train how to look after people, to think about security, to look at first aid, to how your responsibilities and the things that you had to do. All of that came into fantastic stead for me to do in terms of promoting, where I had no idea what I was doing. I mean, I just did it, and it worked. But my thought process came from that early training. And my thought process was learning, and you learn by experience, of course, was thinking about all the things, if I'm doing an event, that could go wrong, and making copious lists of everything I could possibly think of that could go wrong, and how do I correct that, or how do I preempt it. And that's really how it came about. Meeting the artists is because I'm a natural networker. I've always enjoyed meeting people, talking to people, meeting different groups of people, because most people, when they grow up, stay within their peer group. They grow up with a bunch of friends, they're in a gang, they're in a bunch of friends, they hang out together. They don't really move outside their group until they get separated for different reasons. And I used to flip from one group to another and befriended a number of groups. I don't know why, but I just did. I kind of enjoyed it. And I think that the wonderful word of experience is the best training camp of all. There isn't a better one. And you learn by your mistakes, and not everything went right. and we weren't making much money. But to be honest with you, I never thought about the money. My theory was, if I've picked the right act, put on a great event, sold the tickets, it's going to work, and at the end of the day, somewhere, I'm going to make some money. It was never, ever my prime mover. My prime mover was picking out acts that I thought people wanted to see and presenting them in a way that they would enjoy, both the acts and the audience. And really, from the very beginning, the big lesson I learnt very quickly was going to see other shows and getting quite frustrated. I remember going to see Ray Charles, who was a hero, at Hammersmith Odeon, and the first half was his big band playing with the Raylettes, the singers, and then the second half, then it was a 30-minute break, then the second half was the Raylettes and the sax player playing all these solos of the big band, and then finally Ray Charles comes on for about 35 minutes, and I've been sitting in his place for 2 odd hours, see 35 minutes of my hero, paying an extortion amount of money for a ticket at that point, and feeling really angry and frustrated and thinking I'm never going to let that happen. And the fact that the other people in our business were from a different school and that were to some extent treating artists a bit like cans of baked beans. It was just, they were just doing shows. There was no soul or emotional meaning to it. And I decided very early on that I'm only going to work ever with acts I like. If I don't like them, I don't care how good they are selling wise, I just can't get into it. So I learned how to look after people. I learned how to network. I was prepared to take risks. I had a good eye and ear for talent. And the other thing that I was prepared to do was be where the buck stopped. So when all the chips are down, I wasn't happy, but I accepted that I was the guy that put my hand up and say, it's me. And I think those attributes have stood with me all the way through my life, my working life. And I learnt those very early on, that you've got to be out front and you've got to take care of your audience as well as the artists.
Well, I mean, even with the artists, I mean, you've named a few, but Bob Dylan, the Rolling Stones, The Who, Bruce Springsteen, Santana, I mean, Luciano Pavarotti, Sting, Genesis, Eric Clapton, Prince, and I've probably left loads out.
Yeah.
The Eagles, Led Zeppelin, and the list goes on and on. And from what I gather, you still have a fantastic relationship with all of them, don't you? Well, with the ones who are still around, yeah.
Yeah. It was just, I was lucky. It was a great period of time. All these acts were coming up out of nowhere, and I was the guy that was putting on shows. And the other thing I learned, again by accident, when I started this club down in Brighton and started doing all these events, and I did some pretty cool events. I mean, I did an all-night show that started at 7 and went on till breakfast for Rag Week down in Brighton at the Metropole Hotel. And we fed 4,000 people with breakfast at 4 o'clock in the morning. They didn't know one had ever seen that before. And it worked. We had no trouble. And again, I felt that security was important, management was important, giving the audience real value was important, and a little bit of added extra.
Did you learn a lot from your journey when you travelled America when you were young? Did that help you? Did that influence you somehow?
Only in seeing how a big event could be done, because at that point I never thought about it. But more about that there was a much bigger music world out there than there was just in England and indeed in London. And in the middle of it, kind of at the very early end of it, in between starting the garden parties and doing the poster company and starting to do these gigs, I panicked. And I felt that I really don't know anything about the business. I need to learn. So I actually left the partnership and I went to work for the manager of a seriously popular actor at the time, Manfred Mann. And I worked for him for 10 months. He was an Australian TV producer, very strange chap, because every time I met him I had a row with him. And but nevertheless, he spent most of the time in Australia, and he just kind of dropped me in it. He said, look, just take care of Manfred Mann. And by the way, we're in the middle of forming a new group called the New Seekers, which is out of the Seekers, and you've got to take care of them. And Manfred's touring, and I'm going, oh, yeah, very good, very good. I used to go and hang out at a club called the Speakeasy, which is 50 yards from my office. And you'd go down to the Speakeasy 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night, and every act that today would be the ultimate heroes, it didn't matter whether it was the Animals or Jimi Hendrix or Eric Clapton or Jack Bruce or Pete Townsend or Mick Jagger, they'd all go to this club. And then after their gigs, wherever they were, they'd come to the club, they'd have dinner. There's this wonderful restaurateur there called Luigi, who was an extraordinary character. And they'd all get up and jam. And Manfred Mann and Mike Hugg, who was the drummer in Manfred Mann's band, I got very friendly with them. They didn't really appreciate the fact I was actually working for them. They didn't get it because the manager had never really told them. And one night I'm at the Speakeasy and hanging out with Mike Hugg. It's 4 o'clock in the morning. The chairs are all on the table and everybody's pretty well kind of slowly but surely falling out of the club. And Manfred and Mike turned around and said, you do tours, don't you? And I went, oh, yeah. And Manfred said, I'll call you tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock, and we'll discuss our tour. So I was living quite a way north at the time. I got into the office. I mean, I got home about 5:30. I got into the office. It must have been 20 past 10. I didn't know where I was. I mean, it was a seriously late night. And I walk in the office, and a girl who was a receptionist, who happened to be Peter Sarstedt, who was another great singer's sister, turned around and said, you're in deep trouble. I said, what's the matter? She said, Manfred Mann rang at 10 o'clock, wanting to know where you were, rang at 5 past, 10 past. It's now 20 past. You better call him up at home because he's going loopy. What? So I called him up and I said, hello, Manfred, it's Harvey. He said, I don't even know why I wasted my time talking to you. I said, what do you mean? He said, when I tell you I'm going to call you at 10, you better damn well be there. And I said, well, it was a bit of a late night. He said, I'm not interested. Anyway, he puts the phone down on me and I'm thinking, well, that's me done. And about an hour later, he phoned me back. He said, okay, we want to do a tour. And this is when we want to go out. These are the dates, how many dates we want to play. Can you book the tour? And I just said, okay, fine, put the phone down. I'd never done a tour in my life. And I'm going, what do I do now?
If you're interested in watching the video content of this interview and many others, or interested in learning from world leaders and teachers, go to www.thebestyou.online.
I kind of got off the panic floor and thought, okay, tour. That means I've got to book venues, and do I promote it? Do I find local? What do I do? Anyway, I started asking around, and within a couple of days I'd realised that there was actually a circuit, which I didn't even know about, and started to book Manfred Mann's tours, and we did the New Seekers tours, and then we started, there's another thing, another total coincidence. This guy, Davy Joseph, who was a very successful TV producer, he produced a Saturday morning show, which is a bit like Top of the Pops Plus, called Hey Hey It's Saturday. And this show was like the #1 kind of young youth attraction show in Australia for over 20 years. And every act that you've ever heard of from Australia came out of this show. And he was more interested in the production of that. And when that series finished, he'd come back over to England. Meantime, he had quite a thriving little business. And they had a jingles company and the management and whatever. And one day he came to England and we sat down on one of the few days where we didn't have a row, and he said to me, we're going to film Tony Bennett. And I went, what? He said, we're going to film Tony Bennett. There's something called videos coming out. He said, I can't tell you what it is or how, but nevertheless, we're going to stockpile a series of concerts on film on 16mm cameras. And I'm kind of looking at me and going, I don't know what he's talking about. So he said, unfortunately, I won't be here. I'm sending over my chief cameraman and whatever, and you'll have to go down and direct the film. And I'm going, yeah, of course. Mm-hmm. What else? Why not? Daryl Zanuck, here I come. So go down to, I don't know where that, we went to some horrible venue in Bognor Regis, and we filmed Tony Bennett, we filmed Manfred Mann, we filmed Herman's Hermits, and then we filmed some Australian bands. And suddenly, not only am I doing touring, I'm doing my concerts, I'm doing my events, and suddenly I'm a film producer. It was unbelievable, out of nowhere. This guy, to his credit, I don't really know how, where, or when, but the whole notion of videos were obviously being talked about in that early 70s period, end of the 60s. Nobody quite knew what it was, but they wanted to capture all these artists and stockpile them until whatever this thing was coming out. Still, we did them all in super 16mm film. It was really quite interesting.
So you worked for him for 10 months?
Yeah, so I'm earning 25 quid a week. I'm paying my own expenses. I'm getting no help. And I said to him, look, I'm doing all this work. Everything's working great. I want a piece of the company. Yeah, we'll talk about it. After the 4th film I'd made, and I won an award as well. I filmed this Australian band called The Masters Apprentices as a little clip that went out on television. And I got an award for it. And I'm in Manchester filming Herman's Hermits. And he was in Australia, and I phoned him up, and it was like, because of the hour change, it was morning his time. I said, David, I'm fed up with this. You keep telling me you're going to give me, I want 25% of the company. I want it now. I'll run the film company. I'll do all the work for you on whatever you need done on Manfred and that and the other. But I want to know right now I'm going to get it, and then I want an agreement. And he said, oh, well, I'll be over in a month or so and we'll talk about it. I said, screw you, we're not talking about it. Either you tell me now or I'm out of here. And I literally, 2 o'clock in the morning, I plucked up courage and I thought, screw this, I'm off. And I just left. I left the company. I went back into promoting, carried on with started these garden parties. And that was the end of my learning period, 10 months. Of learning the business. I learned a lot, by the way, but it was a painful experience, and I thought, I don't like this. I'd rather just get on and do my own thing. But as we were expanding, we didn't have the resource to expand, and we couldn't get any bank finance, no different than today. And so we identified a father and son business called John and Tony Smith, who at that time were promoting the Rolling Stones around the country, were promoting the Who, were doing the Dubliners, were doing Acker Bilk, all these major big popular acts, and they were touring them all over the country. And we wanted the finance to do these Crystal Palace bowl shows because we didn't really know whether we'd sell the tickets. We had to sell 15,000 tickets, and it was all a bit of a wing and prayer. And they agreed to come on board and fund it. At the end of it, they put up 100 quid for the licence, and we never looked back. That was it. And then in 1972, we talked with them, and they said, look, why don't you come and join our company and put all your assets in, and we'll split the company in 4, and we'll take a quarter each. And I thought, look, it's surety, it's whatever, and it's a great way of doing it. And I was really interested in the promoting side at that point, and I was getting quite friendly with the Stones and the Who and this and that and the other. And in 1972, we formed John Smith Entertainments, and John and his son Tony Smith and my original partner from college, a guy called Michael Alfandari, and myself were formed this company. And the next thing I knew, I'm running around not only England but all over Europe doing tours, and I'm doing tours with Wings and the Stones and the Who and the Pink Floyd and Lord knows what else. And John was looking after the Dubliners and Acker-Bilk and Shirley Bassey, and there was another female singer who was a nightmare, who I think about, and things like that. And we were starting really to build up a major company, fantastic business. And so the Crystal Palace garden parties, as they were called, were very good profit centres. The touring was doing well, and we were all over. I mean, literally, you'd come in on a Monday and I'd come back 10 days later after being around the country and whatever, being on the road. And again, there was a whole slew of acts coming up, and we invested a lot in new bands. We'd put packages of acts together. We'd work with the record labels to try and keep a flow through of newer artists. And we created this thing called the Naughty Rhythms Tour. And we did it 2 or 3 times, and each time we did it, we put a different new acts on it. One of the acts that came out of it was a band called Genesis. And Genesis were getting more and more popular, but their management was all over the place, and they would sold bundles of records, selling out all their tours, and they were broke. And they were getting highly pissed off about it. And Tony was really overseeing those tours. And Tony Smith got very friendly with Genesis. And then in 1975, we'd meet, all of us, the 4 of us would only meet every 3 months or so, because we were never, we were just permanently on the road at that point. And in 1975, Tony came to us and said, look, Genesis have come to see me. They've become more and more popular. They're in a complete financial mess, and they want me to take over as their manager, but they don't want to be part of an organisation. And I've decided I want to split and take over the management of Genesis. And at that time, we were working with another band called Family, another really popular band. And Michael was looking after Family. I was promoting. John was doing the middle of the road stuff, and he had a chain of clubs called Alex's Discos. They were all over the country. And so at the end of 75, we agreed to split the company up. And I really wasn't interested in management at the time. So I took over the promoting. Tony took Genesis. Michael took Family and some other bits and pieces. And John went off to do his clubs. And we split the business up, and I started on my own business in 1976. And the first things I had to do, one was I was working with a band called Lynyrd Skynyrd, one of my favourite bands of all time, of a group of complete nutcases. And then the Rolling Stones came to me and said I'd worked with them. I did a week with them at the Roundhouse and done other odd gigs with them and a bit of touring. And they said, we want to do a big run of shows at Earl's Court. And that's really when I started on my own, as a fully fledged on my own promoter.
And what were your beginnings then? Because I know you raised a lot of money over the years, and you've done some amazing TV events like the Cambodia, Live8. How did all that come around?
That was a little bit later, because by that time I was working with a lot of big acts, doing a lot of work with Track Records, which is the Who, and other bands that they had around them. And it was the Who that wanted to do a tour, which we ended up calling it Who Put the Boot In, of stadiums. So we did 6 stadiums around the country. We played at QPR. We did Wembley one year. We did Charlton next year, where we broke the house record of more people in Charlton than they've ever seen in their lives before. And we went up to Stoke, we went to Scotland, went to Newcastle. And Pete wanted to raise some money, got very much and emotionally involved in a organisation run by a lady called Erin Pitsey called Battered Wives. And she was trying to build hospices, or really homes, for wives that have been beaten up and, you know, really badly abused. And he wanted to raise money to help her. He had befriended her. And we had a big meeting about it, and he said, look, I want to put all the profits that we make out of it into Battered Wives thing. And that was really my first real experience. Before that, George Harrison had put on the concert for Bangladesh, which is the first ever real kind of fundraising rock concert. Mm. And so I read everything I could about it, and I talked to George about it and how it worked. And we set up a structure for the Who thing, and it was very successful, and we raised a lot of money. And at that point, I realised that I'm taking out of this business. I can actually put something back by doing not much more than what I do every day, only a bit more effort to make sure that whatever charity I'm working with makes money. And that was really that start of that pathway.
Mm. Fascinating stuff you've done with those. Out of all the events, I suppose the one that stood out was Live8 when you organised that with Bob Geldof. And
well, by the time I got to Live8, which was 85, I'd already, that was doing this. I was doing this all the time. So at that point, I suppose I was promoting on average 600-700 shows a year. I was doing. I'd got involved in different organisations. I did a tour of Paul McCartney and Wings, and we did a week of concerts at Hammersmith Odeon called the Concerts for Kampuchea, which he did for the United Nations. And then we started seeing pictures on TV which had never been seen before, of people starving in Africa. And Bob Geldof and Mijor got together, they produced a record, it was a huge success. And then Bob kind of in March of 85 said, look, the record's been a huge success, and we want to do something more. We want to do a big concert at Wembley Stadium. And I'd already worked at Wembley Stadium, and I worked at arenas, and I had this process where I'd build acts up from clubs to small venues to bigger venues to bigger venues, and mixing and matching them all the way through my life. So, I was already used to working at Wembley Stadium and so on. And at the time, I was actually, Roger Waters had split from the Pink Floyd. We did the wall shows, and also I was doing a lot of shows at Earl's Court, which was the biggest venue of all, and still is actually. We'd finished doing the wall. I did all the Pink Floyd shows at Earl's Court. I did dozens and dozens of shows at Earl's Court. And then Roger decided to leave the Pink Floyd and was working on a solo project, and he came to me, and I was kind of, at that point, looking after him. I had a previous experience of management. We were about to embark on a Stones tour, and Bill Wyman phoned me up one day, and he said, Van Morrison's coming into town. Van Morrison was a guy that I had never worked with. I worked with Rory Gallagher, who was the consummate guitarist and most incredible guy. And Van Morrison, of all the artists around, actually was a hero. This was a guy that he knew how to make music. He understood emotion. He never played the same music twice. And you couldn't get to him. And Bill said, Van wants to come and see you because he's looking for a manager, and can you give him some ideas about who he should go and see for management? And I was highly flattered at the time. Met with Van Morrison. We had a chat. He just come out of rehab. He was looking for management, wanted to restart his career. And we met again, and then on the third time he said to me, OK, I've heard all the suggestions you've made and I've decided I want you to be my manager. And I went, no, I don't do management. He said, yes, you're going to be my manager. And I managed Van Morrison for 3 years, which was a bit of an experience.
I bet.
So I had all that going on. I was working with Roger Waters, and at the time, a new pop band had arisen called Wham. And I was quite friendly with Simon Napier Bell, and he created this band called Wham. And I literally did the very first concert of theirs and all these tours. And around that time, Simon called me up one day and said, we're going to go to Hong Kong and then China. He said, I'll be in Hong Kong, but I need you to take care of China. And I'm going, what? He said, as you do. And so I had Roger Waters launching his solo career at Radio City in New York with an album called The Pros and Cons of Hitchhiking, which he wanted to do holographically in Radio City, which no one had ever done before. I had Wham going to Hong Kong and then China with a complete unknown about China. And Bob's banging on my door about the idea of doing this big concert for Band Aid. And I said to Bob, I can't cope with this now. I've got to get this Roger Waters and Wham out of the way. I'm literally going to New York, launching Roger Waters. He's going off on the road, and then I'm going from New York to Hong Kong and then into the unknown in China. And I said, when I get back, I'll have a think about it. And he was driving me crazy. And literally the morning after I got back to the office, he was camped outside my office and said, you've got to do this. And he said, I booked Wembley Stadium and this is the date and you've got to do it. And the rest is what happened.
Amazing.
And we had no idea. I mean, at that point, the truth was he didn't have a single act. Even when we had the press conference, other than him, he was the only act that was actually booked. And he's rattling off everybody he'd ever heard of that was playing. And, of course, none of them knew anything about it. Or they'd heard a bit, but none of them had committed. Anyway, we put the concert on. Our target was £1 million. Because he wanted to raise... He'd been out to Africa and he wanted to raise a chunk of money to get some medical supplies, food and things like tents and blankets out to this refugee camp. And he was really wound up about it emotionally. And the idea of the concert was to raise £1 million. The night before the concert, we spoke to each other about 2-ish in the morning and thought, you know what, we're going to raise £5 million on this concert. And of course, we ended up raising 160 million or whatever it was. Mm. And that really opened up a whole other part of my life of understanding what to do with chunks of money and how to make sure it's given out efficiently as possible and so on and so forth. And funnily enough, the Band Aid Trust still exists today. We still get money in every year. We dish it out as fast as we can, but we have a process which, again, separated us out from most charities where we don't give money to a charity. We only give money to a solution that's presented to us where the indigenous population, the people who are hit by it, are the people that can operate the project and make it work. And we won't just give money out for things. We get quotes, 3 quotes for every job we do. We get the best quote. We beat the shit out of the suppliers of whether it's trucks or food or medicines, get the best price, and then we let the money go.
Well, I think when you manage
run that through all the way, and that's been another. In terms of all of my fundraising life, it's a real principle that if people are going to give money, it's our duty of care to make sure that money goes to where it's supposed to go, 1, and 2, that we get the best value out of it.
To find out more about our latest projects, get a free coaching lesson, or download my book, go to www.bernardo-moya.com.
But what I find fascinating about it is that I suppose what happened with that is the impact it's had since. Because obviously, I mean, I suppose raising money on television and the awareness just went to a completely different level, didn't it? It had never been done in the world.
It was
before.
a first on all fronts. It was the first time that 2 concerts, and in fact 3 concerts, because he started in Australia, had ever happened simultaneously. It was the first time that television had ever devoted 17 hours of time to one event, music, live TV, and it set a record in terms of the money it raised and the support it got, because obviously without the artists supporting it, who really got into it in the end, they were fantastic. The TV distribution had never happened in that way before. 160 odd countries put it out live, or as live, because obviously you go to the Far East, they get either waking up in the morning or going to bed because they're so far ahead and so on. And it was a number of firsts that had ever happened. And again, we wormed our way through it. And the other most poignant part of Live Aid was that we did start to finish in 10.5 weeks.
Wow.
And I was in the middle of doing a Bruce Springsteen tour as well.
Yeah.
So, and then Madonna.
But that's what because you just said it briefly, Harvey, before. You said, like, you would do like 600 or 800 concerts a year. I mean, you know, how did you do it?
I used to go into the office October and November, and most of December, we'd average about 8 shows a night. I used to go in the office and find out who I was that night. And actually, it's quite hard, because tours are like a rhythm. You know, people get together. It's an unholy alliance of crew and band members and whatever. They rehearse. They put a show together, which is normally based on an album. They then, you know, the tours are booked. So there's a promoter involved. There's an agent involved. There's a manager involved. And this very unholy marriage, somehow or the other, everybody knuckles down to try and make it work. It doesn't always work. And then these guys are going on the road, and then this family is literally moving every day to another city. And it's a family. And everybody's got their pecking order and their place and all the rest of it, but it's a family. So if you don't get on, it's a nightmare. And somehow or the other, 95% of all artists on the road, somehow with their family, it works. It is a kind of a minor miracle, to be honest with you. But those tours take on their own life and their own rhythm. So there's all the internal jokes that go on, because there's always some joker in the thing that keeps everyone amused. There's this one screwing that one's wife, girlfriend, mother, sister, aunt, or whatever. There's somebody else who's doing drugs that they shouldn't be and thinks he hasn't been found out, but everybody in the family knows about it. There's some aggravation going on between the guitarist and the singer. And so there's this whole intrigue of the family grows up as a tour progresses. And so for someone like me, I'm dipping in and out. It's actually quite hard to get into the rhythm of it, because you're kind of left, you're out on a wing. And I like to be involved in everything. I'm just as much concerned, and often a number of acts came to me because the crew insisted they work with me. I mean, Queen's crew, for example, came to my house. I used to live in Mill Hill, and they were going up north. And I said to them, I saw them somewhere or the other. There was another guy promoting them, and they said, we're being looked after really badly. We're not getting fed. We're working 24 hours a day. We get no time off. We're living in buses. It's a pain in the arse. So I jokingly said to them, well, next time you go up the motorway, I live at virtually the beginning of the motorway, pop in and I'll make you all breakfast. One morning, they all fucking turned up. I made them all breakfast. Next thing I know, I'm doing Queen. And the band said, look, you know, and then they started, I remember you from Kensington Market and this, that and the other. And they knew about me and so on and so forth. But, You have to take care of the crew. They're vital elements of any touring process. And the guy that knows everything and is the guy that can cause the most damage is the guitar roadie in a rock band. Because he's the last guy in a quiet room where there's only him and the lead guitarist in a room doing the final tune-up, where any aggravation that's going on the tour, any problems with the promoter, any aggravation with anybody else, that's when it comes out. 15 minutes before that artist going on stage. And you've got to make damn sure that you keep that guitar roadie sweet, otherwise you're in the shit. You learn all these things. You don't know about them at the time, but you really do learn them quickly. So part of the monkey puzzle is, of course, you've got to take care of the artists. You've got to befriend the managers. You've got to have trust within the agents who book the acts globally. Get that out of the way. You've got to have the balls and the resource to stick your neck out because you're betting on the 3:30 every day. But beyond that, you must take care of the crew and the tour manager and the stage manager and the hump. You've got to take care of that crew because you depend on their goodwill to make sure the shows start on time, there's no aggravation, there's no extra costings, that they get out on time and they're moving to the next city. And then when you come to the show, you have to make sure that audience is having as good a time as they expect, if not more. Because they're the guys paying for everything. And if you don't take care of that audience or understand what the problem is, or be prepared to stand up and be counted if something's gone wrong, then you're not doing your job properly. Mm-hmm. Puzzle. It's a monkey puzzle.
Massive puzzle, yeah. And when you see the shows and you see, you know, all the people involved, it's like a city. It's like it's like a little mini town, isn't it? With everybody working.
Sometimes it's 200 people on the road.
Exactly. Yeah.
Night after night after night. So it's only a matter of time before something goes wrong.
You've seen many bands over the years, Harvey, and you've seen a lot of very many successful ones. In your mind, and it's difficult to generalise, but what do you think the difference was between the ones that made it and the ones that didn't? Is there any kind of common denominator there?
Funnily enough, every major act and every successful act has a successful manager behind them. And people discount that today. They think managers don't really do anything because the lawyer's all important. Well, guess what? Lawyers in our entertainment business are like parasites because all they want to do is milk as much out of it as possible. They change the face of how an act thinks and the act has total control. But the difference then was everybody was doing it for the right reason. And today, the only reason artists go on the road is money. And often when you suddenly see an act that you haven't seen on the road for a while or hasn't done anything for a while, the reasons why they're on the road has got nothing to do with the music, that they want to go and play great music or whatever. It's either the bank manager or the wife or the girlfriend. One of the three. When the wife and girlfriend are pretty much, lump them together. So either they need money or they're having aggravation at home of some description or other. They want to go on the road. That's why they do it. There is no other reason why they do it.
I could talk to you all day, Harvey. Just a few more questions I wanted to ask you. And it's just a bit more regarding kind of society nowadays and, and kids and the new generation. And we're talking about obviously from just leaving school and college and uni to people that's trying to find a job. What do you think the most important assets are nowadays? What do people need?
In entertainment?
In entertainment, yeah.
Okay. It depends. I mean, people come to me every day of the week. So I want to be in your business. I want to learn about entertainment. I want to do press. I want to know about. You've got to, first of all, if you want to be in the entertainment business, please research which bit of the entertainment industry interests you. It could be being a PR guy. It could be being a roadie or a tour manager. It can be an A&R guy, either finding talent at a record company. It could be general management. It could be finance. It could be an agent. It could be a manager. Please think about what it is that interests you. The next thing is you've got to go through some serious rough times before you get the smooth times. And you've got to be able to make mistakes and learn from those mistakes. And you've got to be able to stick it through, because when things go wrong, they go wrong, and you can get right down to the bottom, as I have a few times. And you've got to be able to pick yourself up and bring it all back. You've got to have confidence in yourself, because this is a business about confidence. Even if you're a performer, you've got to have confidence to be able to project yourself over a stage and project yourself into an audience. If you're behind the scenes, you've got to have the confidence to worm your way through the mire and say, I'm the best at what I do. And if you become an expert in a particular craft or good at a particular craft, excel in it and become the best in that craft, whichever side of the business you end up being. You're going to do PR, be the best PR guy. You do A&R, be the best A&R guy, and so on. You're going to be a sound engineer, be the best sound engineer. That's your aspiration. The rest of it is luck and timing. Mm. And you've got to be, and if you're going to be on the management side, which is promoter, management, agent, and so on, you've got to be able to have confidence in yourself, and you've got to go out there and network with people and worm your way around, and you've got to be able to do that. If you find that difficult, which a lot of people do, then don't go into that side of the business.
I suppose a lot of the stuff you said you could probably use in life. What do you think in general nowadays with society, unemployment, uncertainty? What do you think? What do we need to do differently?
We have a problem. Today is a real problem, because in the past, when there's been economic rough times, music and entertainment's kind of risen above it, because people just get fed up with seeing and reading bad news every day, and they go, to hell with it, I'm going out. And music has overtaken that. Today, music is just part of what a young guy does. You know, it's just part of it. And the problem is, it's a dilemma, because music is more available and consumed more today than ever. And yet we don't, as an industry, understand how to monetize it properly. And so the music industry is suffering as much as the rest of the economic world. And so it's very difficult to break in. But if you really want to do it, be it as a performer or as an aid to a performer, i.e. a sound engineer or a lighting director or whatever, you've got to persist. You've just got to keep going till you've got to the point where you've explored every avenue to get there. And what's sad about today is because this new generation of people, to some extent, have had it easy. I mean, when I started in my business life, I had 50 quid left over from my grant at university. I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't think about the money. I just thought, if I'm enjoying myself and I'm doing what I want to do, it'll work. Today, we pamper to the new generation a bit too much, and they go around in packs, and we have all this gang issue and all that problem, because as a pack, the confidence within that pack is much stronger than the individual. Young kids today who find it difficult to get a job, who get bamboozled about university and then let down, they come out with first-class degrees or, honours degrees or whatever, and then they can't get a job. They're totally disillusioned with life. They lose their confidence. And we're in a world today, it's survival of the fittest. And so if you really believe you're good at something, I was talking to a girl last night at a charity do. She was telling me she's getting married in a couple of months' time, and her boyfriend's an electrician and so on and so forth. And she was saying, well, he the bit he hates is dealing with boilers and the plumbing side of it and whatever. And I said, well, if he's an electrician and he's a bloody good electrician, that guy is going to be in huge demand. I said, tell him, don't spread out and try and be the jack of all trades and screw it up. Just become the expert on what you like and what you're good at, and be a real expert. You'll get through the mire. But if you try and be a bit of everything and not a real craftsman in anything, it's tough. And the same goes to the music business. It's a really, everybody wants to be in it because like a cop-out. You know, what do I do? I've just got an honours degree in economics or religion or whatever it is I've got. What do I do now? Oh, I'm going to be in the music business. It's easy, isn't it? It isn't easy. It's bloody hard. And it's harder today because there aren't that many outlets for it, because the business is contracted. Because up until 18 years ago, record companies were flush with so much money that all sorts of ancillary sides of it, from making videos to movies to TV shows to makeup artists to dress designers to this stylist, this, that and that, this whole kind of conglomerate world grew up around an artist. And then, of course, there was the passion of the celebrity. So alongside the celebrity, security people and drivers and Lord knows what. So there was money everywhere. Today, it's that much tougher. And it's that much harder to break into the business. You just got to be damn sure you're bloody good at what you're trying to do and stick with it.
Harvey, I know you've been promoting recently the Cirque du Soleil, and what are you doing now? I've seen obviously your information on your company Ignite. Tell me a little bit about what you're doing at the moment.
I've cut down doing thousands of shows. Basically, I've got a little bit bored with it. I love producing events. I go around the world producing events, be it doing the World Cup in Rio or in South Africa, or working in China or Hong Kong, doing events in India. And so I've broken a lot of new territories. I mean, I took the first pop act to Russia, and I took the first pop act to China, and broke the mould in India and Singapore. I took Eric Clapton to Mozambique in the middle of a civil war, and I had the government on one side and the rebels on the other side, and I said, nobody's fighting for this weekend, and after we left, you do what the hell you like, but while we're here, you're going to see a concert. I've done complete mad things, and I've had a fantastic time of it. So I concentrate now on a number of businesses that I'm involved with, less charities than I got to the point at the end of the 90s where I was spending 3 days a week on charities and whatever, and I said, I can't do this anymore. Concentrating on less. I have a marketing company which is I'm really spending a lot of time with them and really enjoying it, and it's got some fantastically creative people on and working on it. And I dip in and out of management. I was managing 2 artists until very recently, and decided that I'm fed up with management. I never really liked it, to be honest. I've always done it as a favour, and I've managed a number of quite big acts in my time. But my love really is producing events. That's what I love doing, and I do it all over the world.
Brilliant. My last question. What would you like your legacy to be?
My legacy, I don't know really. I suppose I found a solution for the O2 in London, which I'm very proud of. I'm trying to figure out a solution for the Olympic Stadium, and failing dismally because dealing with people who haven't got a clue what they're doing, and dealing with government people. And I suppose if I really want a legacy that I'm going to be proud